welcome everyone to Viada's Tiny House Village. I'm here with my partner, L.A. Davis, Vauban Schwartzwald, aka. How are you, Mr. Davis, today?
No, it's Sportswall today. I'm fine.
You're
Yeah.
good. I know we're in Florida and it is hot. So that's the word for the day is hot, right? Because
Yep.
I think I think we both have sweat lodge dwellings, right?
Feels like it.
For sure. So welcome everybody. I hope everybody's doing well out there in uh,
Wherever they are.
YouTube land. We're here to share some information about the matrix. Because we live in a matrix. And the depth and the dimensions of this matrix are so vast and so wide and so far that we're going to just touch on it today, right, LA?
Yes.
So we're going to go into some matrix fundamentals, and especially in light of tomorrow, or the 8th of August, Monday, starts the Lions Gate portal. And tomorrow on my Soul Purpose Healing show, I'm going to be doing a show on preparing for the Lions Gate cosmic portal. So you don't want to miss that tomorrow on blogtalkradio.com, Soul Purpose Healing. But LA is going to bring us into the knowledge and wisdom of the matrix. And we're going to just dive into the matrix, which will kind of introduce us into the Lionsgate energy that we're all going to be influenced by in the next few days. So, LA, let's start with what matrix fundamentals, and I know you're going to go into household matrix and math matrix and tiny house
Well,
matrix.
I'm gonna keep it. Uh, do an introduction. Keep things simple. I'm gonna need your help on this. Do you have something to write with, like a pencil and a piece of scrap paper?
I do, yes.
All right. Now I'll start off with this. There are different types or different distinctions of matrices. And they basically deal with numbers. So I'm going to give an example of a matrix that everybody can relate to based on generations. So all I need you to do is, if when I name them off, just one, two, three, and so forth. So the number one matrix, and we're dealing with generational matrices for this example. All right. Generation number one is the GI generation. You just put one. There's the GI generation, and those people, there's some of those people still living today. They're probably 100 years old or older. That's the GI generation. World War One. Then there's the second matrix for generations are World War Two. Then there's the post-war generation. That's matrix number three. Number four generation is baby boomer one. Baby boomer one, that's a generation. And then there's baby boomer two. Now I'm a member of baby boomer generation number two. Okay. Then there's generation X after my generation, generation X. That would be probably somebody like your children. Then there's millennials. Then there's Generation Z. All right. Generation Z is as young as 10 years old. And then and put a star by Generation Z, if you would, just as a reminder, put a star by Generation Z. They're as young as 10 years old right now in 2022. And then there's Generation Alpha, which are your grandchildren this day in August 2022. All right. Now, their numbers all included in this, but they're all connected, and we're going to bring this all down to tiny houses. and tiny house villages adding into this. But I'm gonna try to simplify it as much as possible. All right, now I have a house in Washington D.C. and my next door neighbor, or my former next door neighbor, who is 101 years old right now. Now she's part of Generation One, the GI generation. All right. Once again, GI generation people, they're typically 100 years old or older. All right. Or a little bit younger than 100, but you get the picture. All right. Now, she had two children, and those are members of Gen, Baby Boomer 1,
Yes.
Baby Boomer 1 generation, and Baby Boomer 2. All right. Now, my mother, who's changed energy forms, she was a member of the post-war generation, which is the third generational matrix that I mentioned. All right, now,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
when the two children, when one child who was is a part of um, Baby Boomer 2 and Baby Boomer 1, um, they sold the house for $500,000, over $500,000, but I'm selling for $500,000. So when they did that, what they did was they wiped out, like for instance, if one of, and we'll call her Miss B, as in B. So if one of Miss B's grandchildren or great grandchildren have to start over or even start, then in Washington, D.C., Chicago, Boston, L.A., one of those places, even Orlando, then those children would have to start at $500,000 to into the game and enter into the matrix of home ownership. I'll give you another example. In
You're breaking up a little
1975,
bit. Can you adjust your? You're
what about
freezing
now?
up. You're freezing up and you're breaking up. Can you adjust your camera or your
Uh,
phone?
what about now? Is
You're
now
froze.
better?
Okay, that's better.
All right.
Yes.
And in 1975, okay, Miss B, with a household income of 19,500, or anybody in the United States in 1975, if they had a household income matrix of $19,500, they can live in a middle class neighborhood, 3 bedrooms, 3 bathroom house, safe middle class neighborhood, maybe have children in private schools, take a family vacation at least once a year, take a Sunday drive and go get some frozen custard or ice cream for the kids or whatever. You can do that in 1975 in the 1975 matrix on a $19,500 a year income. In order to do that now in 2022, you need $100,000 to do that. If we go back further in time, my great grandmother, she lived on an 80 at 15, 16 years old. She was married and living on her own with my great grandfather, an 88-acre farm for $6,400 in yearly income a year. All right. So what's this got to do with tiny houses?
A lot.
And
A lot.
right. And whatever today's date is, August.
And you're frozen again. Okay, you're frozen. So this has a lot to do with tiny houses. While we wait for my partner, friend, brother to fix his phone, um,
Okay. We went into
you're
the
back.
matrix for a moment. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, we went into the matrix for a minute. All right. So in 20 August 2022, in order to, well, let me give a practical example because I don't want to get detailed with this and complicated. Let's go to Generation Z. All right. That's as young as 10 years old right now. All right. So one of my favorite videos on YouTube is by this. She's 12 years old now, but when she did this video, her name is Lauren Nelson. She lives in New York State. And Lauren, if you look up her video, if you type in Lauren you'll see her story. Lauren bought a camper for $400 on Craigslist. And she had a celebration to buy the camper, and
Your
she
connection
had
is bad.
$400 to fix it up. What about now?
Okay. Okay, it's better now. Okay, she spent four hundred
Okay,
dollars to
Lauren,
fix the camper. Is that what you said?
right? Yeah, then she another $400. Her mother, father, grandmother. What about now?
You're
It's
frozen.
still in the
Can't hear
matrix.
frozen, and I can't hear you.
What about now?
Now,
Now,
okay, okay, go ahead. We'll try
all
again.
right. I think it's this matrix information. All right. So
Yeah.
Lauren Nelson, 10 years old, $800 to buy and fix up a camper. So she
eight
has a
hundred
tiny
dollars,
house.
and that was her whole budget. $800 to buy the camper and fix it up.
Right. With the help of her mother, father, grandmother, and friends, her girlfriends.
Okay.
So that's Generation Z. Generation Z is looking at their parents' generation and their grandparents' generation, and they're saying, you know what? I'm not going to get a mortgage. I'm not going to get any government loans. I'm going to live tiny. So
And
that's
simply.
right. That's the matrix that not all, but many 10, 12, 15-year olds are doing. That's Generation Z. Your grandchildren, which are Generation Alpha, we don't know where they're going to be, but more than likely, they're not going to try to start the game at $200,000 and up. So that's how all the generational matrices are connected.
Okay, so did you mention the math matrix, the mathematics of it? Is that the financial part of it?
Well, yeah, I tried to simplify. Like I said, 1975, you needed $19,500 to live a middle class lifestyle. Now, for the
Okay.
same lifestyle in the same neighborhood, you need that. However, if you like to go with a
Okay, you're frozen again.
what about now?
So, okay, now you're moving. Okay, so the point of our message here today is that uh, when our grandparents were living, they could afford a house for a lot less money.
Right.
They could afford a single family home for a lot less money compared to today's that money value standards matrix, all that. But our grandparents were also, many of them were living in more rural areas. Not many of them were not living in urban areas where houses are really expensive these days, especially in Orlando area. And I think in Florida in general, after COVID, many people started moving away from California and New York, and the house prices went through the roof here. So when we compare our grandparents' living standards, their matrix of finances and household income and uh, all the necessities, food, transportation, inflation has taken over, right?
Right.
So
And
as
what we need to do is we need to go back to our great grandparents, their matrix, and try to live as close to that as possible. And that includes tiny houses.
So I think and so if you have any questions, please post them on the page, and we'll answer them for you. But I was watching a video by Billy Carson, who's a very metaphysical spiritual teacher, about the matrix. We're living in a matrix. So what LA just described to us has to do with a third dimension reality for the most part, right?
Yes.
Physical, housing, money, food, all that's third dimension touching. But when we look at a more metaphysical matrix and existence, we're talking about past, present, future are all the same. And what Billy teaches is when we have a metaphysical mind, consciousness kicks in, and we begin to see this reality we live in more dimensions than just the third dimension. So we want to suggest to you who are listening that you not only consider your third dimensional reality and what you can afford, and consider living in a smaller house with less needs, physical need, third dimensional needs, and go into a more metaphysical matrix where there you realize there's a quantum entanglement, the cosmic order of things, which we're going to talk about tomorrow night on Soul Purpose Healing, with the Lion's Gate opening up. One of the things that is suggested we do to prepare for this Lion's Gate, which comes out of Ezekiel 44, is that we do sun gazing, for instance. Now, that may be something our grandparents never did. I don't know, remember talking. My grandfather was a pastor of a Church of God in Christ. His wife was cooking all the time, and she was a very stout woman, big woman. So they weren't thinking metaphysical, meditation, yoga, any of that. But in today's reality, in today's matrix awareness, today's matrix consciousness, we can take in the whole cosmic quantum entanglement as part of our reality. Not just that we are living in an urban area, in a big house, or in this case, we're suggesting a smaller house, because if a 10-year-old girl can create a comfortable living space, then surely adults can do the same thing. But we have been taught by our grandparents and by the society that bigger is better, and the American dream is what, a 3-bedroom house with a 2-car garage and a big mortgage and lots of things in the house, which, by the way, these days people don't have enough room in their 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. It's in the garage. All their stuff is in the garage. My neighbor, just for give you an example, neighbor across the street hired a big dumpster. They had to deliver this huge dumpster to their driveway, and I heard all this noise. It just dropping this dumpster off was noisy. So I go out front and I look. So they dropped off this huge dumpster. What's it for? To clean out the garage, which they couldn't get their cars in. And they decided to fix the garage door. They got to empty the garage. Well, the garage was packed, no cars, but stuff. They finally made the decision to empty the garage out so they can put a new garage door on and maybe put their cars in. That's the reality we live in. Most of the people in the neighborhoods we live in are using their garage as a storage place. And if they don't have enough room there, they're going to open up a storage unit down the street that plenty opening, right?
Right.
So we want people to think about the matrix they're living in and come into a more quantum awareness that we can don't need these big houses to be comfortable, but we want you to start connecting with the cosmic energy around us, nature, for instance, the trees, the birds, and get out of those big houses and become the teachers for nature. And the next generation is suffering from nature's deficit disorder. So we want you to think about becoming the elders for teachers, and teachers to give our youth, our new, this younger generation, not only the ideas about living smaller, living in a tiny house, but also living with a mind to meditate and take on the quantum entanglement of this is a big universe, and there's a lot of energy out there that we can connect to, communicate with, to make our lives better than our ancestors and our grandparents. We can do better than our grandparents, and we don't have to have a big house to do that. So, LA, you have any final words for
Well,
the
are we
Matrix lifestyle?
are we doing better? Because my great grandmother on my mother's side, at 15 or 16, for a $6,400 a year income, she and my great grandfather had an 88-acre farm which still exists to this day. She lived to be 102. I doubt if she took any over-the-counter medication or prescription medication. Um, she didn't go on government assistance or nothing like that, if they even had that back then. So who's better off? She or us in 2022?
Well, I think it depends on how you're connecting to the cosmic quantum field of life here on planet Earth. If you're unconsciously thinking you want a big house, big car, lots of food, lots of stuff in your house, then you're going to eventually feel the stress of having that type of mindset where much big is better and more is better, versus having the type of lifestyle your grandmother had where you had land and you could grow your own food. And the house might not have been that big or fancy, but at least she was self sustaining, right, with her own
No, it
food.
wasn't. It's still standing. It wasn't. It wasn't big or fancy. It it might have been 700, 800 square feet. That's it. Might have been, mind you.
So that was twice the size of my house is 320 square feet. So a little more than twice the size of what I live in. Our parents, my dad grew up in a one room shed for first 6 years, 7 years of his life, sleeping on the floor of a kitchen, a wood floor in the kitchen. And then
Oh
he,
boy,
when
that's
he passed, he
how big
had
was his
been
house?
living in the smaller one. The bigger one was probably over 7,000 square feet. What the one
700.
he lived in for
Wait a minute, not 700 square thousand. You mean 7,000 square feet?
7,000. Well, there were three floors in this house,
Yeah.
and three bedrooms, four bedrooms, two and a half baths, dining room, living room, kitchen, basement. And I'm just guesstimating that house with the three square, there was at least maybe 6 to 7 square, seven
Now
thousand
let me
square
ask you
feet.
this. Now that's what his wife was in there, and him. That's those two.
And their son, their adult
Oh,
son, for a while.
three. Okay, three. All right. So four bed. Or how many rooms did they live in? I'm not talking about house.
That's the
I'm
big.
not talking about rooms that was furnished, because you can have a furnished room and nobody's living in that room, and you don't live in the kitchen and you don't live in the bathroom. So out of that big house of 7,000 square, how many rooms did they live in?
Well, probably half the number of rooms. They really use that house a lot as far as going to the basement. But here's the big thing: when they both
But
passed away
but
and they had to sell the
using the house, using the house and lit. It sounds like they use the house mostly for storing of stuff.
exactly, that's what I was going to say. when they finally sold the house, both of them passed. The son moved out of the house, too big for him to manage. It took a whole year to clean out all the stuff in that house. A whole year after their death to clean out all the stuff to get it ready to put on the market, just to put it on the market. Because some people like to accumulate lots of goods. That's all I'll say about that. So yeah, most of the houses in the neighborhood are using their garage for storage instead of cars. So that's the idea people have when they buy a house. Oh, more storage for my stuff. And we're
Now,
suggesting let's
let
get
me
out
ask you
of that
this:
mindset.
what rooms did your father live in? He lived or the bedroom, so that's 8 hours out of the day. Then he had a den that he was in. Did they have a den?
I would say my dad spent most of his time in the family room watching TV in the last maybe 10 years of his life, 5 to 10 years of his life. He
So
would get up and out of the bed after he did his meditation, go downstairs and sit in front of the TV most of the day with a remote.
so
Now he lived to be
family.
95 years old.
All right, that's good. Family room, bedroom.
Kitchen,
Two.
kitchen.
He he didn't live in the kitchen.
No, he didn't live there, but he did go back and forth to eat. You know, that was the thing about the kitchen. The kitchen was the eating place. Now, the
Three rooms.
dining room, interestingly enough, they had one of those dining rooms that had the china cabinet all nice and pretty with all this beautiful china. And that was like a storage and a beautiful dining room set. And that was a storage room
All right,
because
but
they
he
rarely, except for Christmas, Thanksgiving, that room was probably never used other than to store things.
3 rooms.
Right. Mainly 3 rooms. And then their son used his bedroom. And then yeah, the bedroom. So yeah, we are not using these all the rooms in these big houses. I worked for a couple that had a mansion, 2 people living in this mansion. And I bet the number of rooms, same number of rooms, 3 rooms in the mansion were
That's it.
mainly.
Even Queen Elizabeth. Now Queen Elizabeth, she has state functions at Buckingham Palace. She lives in about maybe four rooms on average. 700 rooms in the palace, but she lives in about four.
Yeah.
With
So
an $18 billion a year income. So tiny houses cut all. That's why I like tiny houses because you're cutting 70 to 80% fat out.
and so we're going to leave off here with the thought that we all live in multi dimensions. We're living in multi dimensions because our thoughts are things, and you send a thought out and it goes out into the atmosphere, out into the quantum space, so that you don't have to be limited in your living space, and especially you don't have to be limited in your awareness and consciousness of what is good for you, what is beneficial, and what's going to keep you in peace, joy, and happiness. There are other ways to do it, and we're going to bring you more ways to do that in the tiny house village, because that's what's going to be, that's more and more popular these days, to be thinking tiny house villages, because our society is going into a mind of simple living is better and less stressful. Stress is the number one cause of disease. So we are moving, thank goodness, into a consciousness that less stress means less material goods and more conversations like we have today. So thank you, LA Volbon Schwartzwald, for joining me this afternoon. Any final words?
No, no, I want to get out of this heat. That's all.
Okay. I don't blame. So everybody have a good week. And remember, Sunday night we're gonna be preparing you for the Lionsgate portal that's opening up Monday, and a lot of it has to do with sun gazing. So don't miss Sunday night Blog Talk Radio, Soul Purpose Healing. So thank you for joining us today, everybody. Have a great afternoon, great evening, and we'll see you next time.